Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are taking a fascinating turn, diving deep into a language that was born not from the muddy churn of history, migration, or conquest, but from the deliberate, hopeful design of a single person in 1887.
That's right. We're talking about Esperanto.
And it's such a study in linguistic engineering, isn't it? It really forces you to confront this idea that language can be, well, a deliberate technological solution to a human problem.
It absolutely can. Specifically, the problem of global communication gaps. The story of Esperanto is just this extraordinary, almost unbelievable mix of pure linguistic logic on one hand.
And on the other, some of the most intense, frankly heartbreaking political opposition you can imagine from the 20th century.
Exactly that. That clash is what makes it so compelling.
So that dichotomy is what we're digging into today. Our mission is to unpack this creation, which its architect originally called the lingua internatia, the international language. Its core purpose was always profoundly idealistic: to be a neutral, universal second language for everyone. The big idea was that it would foster world peace and understanding, mainly by eliminating the perceived favoritism of using, say, English or French globally.
And that neutrality is the central operating principle. But also, ironically, its greatest political liability.
Yeah.
We're going to look at its meticulously logical structure, analyze the immense political forces that tried to extinguish it, from Paris to Moscow to Berlin.
And discover why, against all those historical odds, it's finding this surprising new life, this new boom in the digital era.
It's a real story of survival.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with the man behind the dream. The architect was L.L. Zamenhof.
Right, a Jewish ophthalmologist who lived in Białystok.
Yeah.
At the time, that was part of the Russian Empire. Today, you'd find it in Poland.
And in 1887, he introduces his creation to the world by self-publishing the first book, the Unua Libro.
And there's a beautiful detail here in just the naming. He didn't actually call the language Esperanto right away. He published all the materials under a pseudonym, Doctoro Esperanto. And that pseudonym translates just perfectly. It means one who hopes.
Ah, that's incredible.
It is. And the early community, they were so charmed and inspired by that concept, they immediately adopted that hopeful name and just assigned it directly to the language itself.
One who hopes. It's an identity defined by idealism from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
That sets the stage perfectly for our first section: idealism, geopolitics, and the struggle for survival. Because Zamenhof's hope, it wasn't some abstract philosophy, was it? It was a deeply practical reaction to the misery he was seeing every day.
That's the key context.
Yeah.
You have to understand where he was coming from. If we dive into his immediate inspiration, we see that his town of Białystok was a powder keg of linguistic and ethnic tension.
Right.
In a really poignant letter he wrote later to Nikolai Borovko, Zamenhof described his childhood city as being rigidly segmented. It was broken into 4 distinct, even openly antagonistic groups.
Russians, Poles, Germans, and Jews.
The 4 groups. And he observed that, quote, each of these spoke their own language and looked on all the others as enemies.
So for him, the mechanism of all this tension, the root cause, was language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He drew this profound conclusion from his firsthand experience. He argued that, and I'm paraphrasing here, the diversity of languages is the first, or at least the most influential, basis for the separation of the human family into groups of enemies.
So for him, a neutral shared language wasn't just a nice idea. It was like humanitarian medicine.
It was. It was intended to inoculate humanity against division and war, a cure for what he saw as the original cause of strife.
So his early goals were enormous. This wasn't meant to be some niche hobby for scholars.
Oh, not at all. He intended for the language to be used en masse. He wanted it to be the whole world's second language.
Which explains his original proposal. It was just incredibly ambitious.
It was. He publicly requested that people sign a promise, a pledge, really, that they would begin seriously learning Esperanto, but only once 10 million other people made the same promise.
He was trying to create a tipping point, to jumpstart global adoption instantly.
Yes, to solve the chicken and egg problem. But this is where the early, painful disappointment hits.
Right.
He admitted later he was disappointed to receive only 1,000 responses.
1,000. I mean, on one hand, that's a huge testament to individual passion, but compared to the goal of 10 million.
It underscored the incredible difficulty of getting a critical mass of humanity to commit to a new linguistic paradigm. It was a massive setback.
But despite that early stumble, the movement did find a brief, explosive heyday. It started spreading really rapidly across Central Europe through the Russian Empire.
and even found these eager communities in East Asia, in China and Japan, of all places.
This rapid growth then culminates in a major, genuine opportunity for global recognition after the devastation of World War I.
Yes, the newly formed League of Nations. It was tasked with promoting international cooperation, and in the early 1920s, this was their chance. The Iranian delegation formally proposed adopting Esperanto as the auxiliary language for international use.
And this wasn't out of the blue. It followed a favorable technical report by a very renowned Japanese delegate, Notobi Inazu.
It did. The groundwork had been laid.
This was the moment. Had that proposal passed, the entire history of international diplomacy, of commerce, possibly even language teaching in schools, it all might have been fundamentally different.
Completely different. Yet it failed. It failed because of one massive entrenched national interest.
French resistance.
French resistance, spearheaded by their delegate, Gabriel Hanotaux. Although 10 other delegates accepted the Iranian proposal, France just strongly opposed any recognition of Esperanto at the League for several years.
And they were driven by this intense, almost frantic sense of linguistic nationalism.
They were. And the reason for their opposition is staggering because it reviews the depth of their fear. The French Ministry of Public Instruction didn't just reject the proposal.
They banned it.
They banned all instruction in Esperanto in French schools and universities, and they stated a profound fear that, quote, French and English would perish, and the literary standard of the world would be debased.
Would perish? That's not subtle language.
Not at all. That statement is gold because it perfectly captures the stakes for them. They viewed Esperanto not as a neutral tool, but as a direct existential threat to French cultural and linguistic dominance.
The idea of a language belonging to no one nation was seen as a corrosive force.
It was a threat to their own national prestige, an attack on their cultural empire.
What's really fascinating, though, is that even though France successfully vetoed its official adoption, the League of Nations itself, the very organization that hosted the debate, recommended just 2 years later that member states should include Esperanto in their public school curricula.
That fact is incredibly telling, isn't it? It shows that the linguists, the educators, they all recognize the value, the international utility of the language.
Yeah, but the political decision, the choice made by a major power protecting its turf, it trumped all the pragmatic and pedagogical recommendations.
The movement was defeated by nationalism and the fear of losing cultural control. Plain and simple.
And that was only the start of its troubles. This is where we transition from French resistance to an era of official, violent repression.
Because the language's core feature, its internationalist, borderless, non-national identity, made it an immediate and primary target for the authoritarian regimes rising in the 1930s.
The Nazi regime is the most brutal example. The ban came swiftly in 1935.
And while part of the motivation was just a general anti-internationalism, the core reason was specific. Zamenhof was Jewish.
So the Nazis automatically linked the language to a supposed Bolshevist or globalist conspiracy.
Yes, and the connection wasn't subtle or implied. Hitler made it explicit in Mein Kampf.
He did.
Yes, he specifically attacked Esperanto. He lists it as a prime example of a language that could be utilized by an international Jewish conspiracy once they achieved global dominance.
So for the Nazi ideology, the very existence of a language designed for all people, without roots in a specific homeland or bloodline.
That was proof of a global plot. It fit their paranoid worldview perfectly.
The consequences for the founders' family were catastrophic.
Tragically, yes. Because of that immediate association between Zamenhof and the language, his family members were specifically targeted and executed during the Holocaust. It's a profoundly painful detail.
It really demonstrates the sheer political terror that can be triggered by the simple pursuit of neutral universal communication.
It does, and yet even in that horror, you find these incredible stories of defiance. The sources mention the astonishing anecdote of dedicated Esperantists teaching the language to fellow prisoners inside the concentration camps.
How did they even manage that?
They taught it in secret. And when guards would ask what they were doing, they'd quickly claim they were teaching Italian.
The language of one of Germany's Axis allies.
Exactly. So the guards would generally just ignore it. That resourcefulness and commitment, continuing to pass on a language of peace under the shadow of genocide, it truly speaks to the power of the idea.
Now, Germany wasn't alone in this. The Soviet Union's repression was perhaps even more cynical, because initially the language enjoyed some support there.
Absolutely. Following the October Revolution in 1917, Esperanto was briefly seen as an ideal tool for global communist revolution. It was international, neutral, logical.
Perfect for a new world order.
Right. There are even biographical notes that suggest Joseph Stalin himself studied the language in his younger days. And the Soviet Esperantist Union was officially recognized for a time.
But this completely reversed. It flipped during the political consolidation and paranoia of the Great Purge in 1937.
The shift under Stalin was dramatic. The Soviet government turned violently against its own internationalist elements. Esperanto speakers were systematically rounded up, executed, or condemned to the Gulag.
And the charge itself is just chilling. It highlights the geopolitical threat they perceived.
The official accusation was, you are an active member of an international spy organization, which hides itself under the name of Association of Soviet Esperantists on the territory of the Soviet Union.
A spy organization?
Can you imagine? Their crime was simple, apolitical communication. But their international network bypassed state censorship and control.
So if a Soviet citizen could communicate directly, privately, with a French citizen or a Japanese citizen without going through official channels?
That was deemed a threat to national security and ideological purity. And while the language was never technically forbidden, using it became an extremely dangerous act until the post-Stalin era.
And we find a similar thread in Francois Spain, though maybe less violent in its implementation. It was suppressed there because the language had become very popular among opposition groups.
Anarchists, socialists, Catalan nationalists, all the groups Franco opposed.
So the common denominator across all these brutal regimes, Nazi, Soviet, Francois, was a total fear of any identity that transcended the nation-state.
That's the core of it. Zamenhof designed a neutral language to solve division, but that very neutrality created this massive political vacuum that totalitarian states refused to tolerate. Its strength as a non-ethnic language was simultaneously its greatest weakness in the face of aggressive nationalism.
It really shows how high the political stakes are in deciding how the world communicates. But the fact that it survived these attempts at extinction suggests an incredible internal resilience.
It does.
What is it about the mechanical design that makes this language so tough and, frankly, so easy to learn? Let's pivot now and dive into Section 2, the logic of language, its linguistic properties and structure.
This is where we get to appreciate the engineering mind of Zamenhof. Linguistically, Esperanto is classified as lexically predominantly Romanic.
Meaning its vocabulary comes from Romance languages.
About 80% of it, yes, which gives it an immediate familiarity to many European speakers. But the internal machinery is what sets it apart. It uses this intensely agglutinative morphology, and its default word order is a simple subject-verb-object, or SVO, just like English.
And Zamenhof didn't just guess at these choices. He was famously a polyglot. He was synthesizing the best parts of the world's languages into this new system.
Correct. We know he spoke or had deep knowledge of at least 13 different languages. Yiddish, Russian, German, Hebrew, Latin, English, Spanish, Lithuanian, Italian, French.
Aramaic, and even Volapük, which was another constructed language of the time.
Exactly. So this vast linguistic perspective allowed him to cherry-pick elements that were both widely recognizable and could be formalized into rules with zero exceptions.
So the vocabulary has a European flavor, but the way the words are actually built is what makes it unique for a European language. You mentioned that agglutinative morphology is atypical.
That's right. Agglutination just means that words are created by smoothly adding roots, prefixes, and suffixes together, and each of those elements retains its distinct meaning. Yeah. It's like building with Legos. Some linguists, like Claude Piron, even noted that this highly systematic word formation process functions more like Chinese, where meaning is built by combining distinct morphemes, than the irregular, fusion-heavy grammar of traditional European tongues.
So it's a true hybrid.
It is. And that hybrid nature is the secret to its efficiency.
Let's talk about phonology and stress. For anyone who has struggled to learn the pronunciation rules of English or French, Esperanto must feel like a gift.
It is absolute consistency.
Yeah.
It features a clean, manageable sound system. 5 pure vowels, 22 to 24 consonants. But the critical simplification rule is the stress.
It's always in the same place.
It is always, without exception, on the second to last vowel. Always.
So if we take the word for family, familio, the stress is on the second to last vowel, which is the I, fammi.aseli.o.
Precisely. Or the word for teacher, instruisto, the stress falls on the I just before the final O.
And this rule is so core to the rhythm of the language that even in poetry, where you might drop that final O for mitter.
Even then, if you allied familio to family, the stress remains fixed on that original second to last vowel. This ironclad regularity just significantly lowers the cognitive load for new learners.
We should briefly touch on the unique sounds that might trip up an English speaker initially, even though the system is consistent.
Right. Consistency doesn't mean familiarity. For example, the letter C is never a soft S or a hard K. It always produces the T sound, like the end of the English word hits or the stees in pizza.
And the letter J is another tricky one for us.
Very tricky. It sounds like the English Y in yellow or yes. But beyond a few of those, every other letter is pronounced exactly as it is written. No silent letters, no shifting sounds based on context. One sound, one letter.
That clarity takes us directly to orthography and the diacritical challenge it posed, especially in the pre-digital era. Zamenhof's drive for that one sound, one letter principle meant he needed 6 accented letters: E, O, and U.
These special characters were essential to keep the sound system clean and distinct. For example, is the show sound, as in shoe, is the J sound, as in gem. Linguistically perfect, but
Logistically, a massive headache for printing, typing, and computing before Unicode and standardized fonts.
a total headache, which is where we see the movement having to adapt technologically. Zamenhof actually foresaw this challenge and created what's called the H convention as a printing workaround.
Okay, so that's replacing the diacritics with digraphs ending in H. So H would stand for E.
Exactly. But the huge practical issue was ambiguity. If you saw the word synchava, how would you know if it was async, meaning followed by hava, having, or if it was the single root sinahava, meaningless?
Ah, I see. A machine can't tell the difference. It just sees a C and an H. Can't know it's a special single sound.
Precisely. It breaks automated sorting, interpretation. That's a real problem. Which brings us to the X convention.
The modern standard for digital communication.
And it's an ingenious solution. Since the letter X is completely absent from the standard Esperanto alphabet, using it to create digraphs like CX for E solves the ambiguity problem instantly.
There's no possibility of confusion.
None. Plus, it has a secondary benefit. When you digitally sort a list of Esperanto words, the X convention words naturally alphabetize neatly after their unaccented counterparts, because X is near the end of the alphabet. It's a beautifully simple hack that brings this 19th century language into the 21st.
Let's get into the engine room now. Grammar and agglutination. This is the simple, powerful source of its low learning curve.
Agglutination allows for incredible word economy. You memorize a few core roots and a set of prefixes and suffixes, and you can construct thousands of new words logically. You don't need a dictionary entry for every single derived term.
Can you give us a few more examples of that?
Certainly. Take the root bona, which means good. To make the opposite, you simply attach the negative prefix mal, giving you malbona, bad.
Simple enough.
Or take the root patro, father. To specify a female, you add the feminine suffix ino, creating patrino, mother. If you want to talk about a place for something, you use the suffix io. A lernejo is a learn place, a school. If you understand 5 roots and 5 affixes, you can immediately create 25 logically related words.
That dramatically reduces the sheer volume of memorization, and this regularity extends to the fundamental parts of speech through what's called the marker system of suffixes.
Every word category is defined by an unbreakable rule. Nouns always end in E.
Adjectives always end in A.
Derived adverbs, meaning adverbs based on a root word, always ends in E. And verbs, which are famously simple, use the tense marker S plus a temporal suffix. As for present is for past. Is is for future. The infinitive is just I.
I think the simplicity of the verb conjugation is one of the biggest attractions for people coming from complicated languages like Spanish or German.
It is the ultimate simplification. There's no conjugation based on person or number. Mi cantas is sing. Vi cantas is you sing. Li or I cantas is he or she sings. Ni cantas we sing. The verb form cantas never changes.
You just need to know the root and the tense you want to express.
That's it.
And then we have the case marking system, which is dual, thank goodness, avoiding the complexity of 6 or 7 cases you get in languages like German or Russian.
Right. It is a 2-case system.
Huh?
Nominative for the subject and accusative, which is always marked by adding the suffix n to the end of the noun.
And the accusative marker n isn't just for direct objects, which is standard. It also carries this crucial function in indicating direction, correct?
That's the elegant efficiency of the system. Let's contrast 2 sentences. If you say, mi idas domon, the Simon tells us the house, domo, is the direct object, I see the house.
Okay.
If, however, you say, mi idas domon, the idas n tells us the word domo is the destination, I go houseward, or I am going toward the house. You don't need a new preposition to show direction, you just attach the case marker.
It's like a built-in GPS tag for motion. It simplifies the use of prepositions significantly.
It really does.
And there is also the need for agreement between nouns and adjectives. This results in 4 core forms we need to be aware of.
It's logical once you internalize the pattern. Noun suffixes define number and case. O for a singular subject, O for a singular subject, O for a plural subject, on for a singular object, and ogenon for a plural object.
And adjectives have to match whatever noun they're modifying.
They have to agree, so they take the corresponding endings. AAJ, AARN, and AJN. Once you know those 4 possible endings, you can apply them to every single noun and adjective in the language.
It feels like a closed, logical puzzle system, which is incredibly satisfying for a learner. Now we have to address the issue of gender in modern reform. The language is sometimes accused of being structurally sexist due to its roots in 19th century society.
And this is a fair structural criticism. It's inherited from the context of its creation. For many kinship terms and older professional titles, the default root was male, requiring a derived suffix for the female equivalent.
Right, we mentioned patro for father versus patrino for mother.
Another example is doctoro for doctor, which was historically a male default, versus doctorino for a female doctor.
But the language isn't static. And it has built-in tools that allow for and encourage gender-inclusive communication.
Precisely. Zamenhof included the prefix specifically to encompass both sexes, as in the crucial phrase geschenderoi for ladies and gentlemen.
And beyond that, we see the community taking active steps toward modernization.
We do. There's the gradual adoption of the gender-neutral singular pronoun re, alongside the traditional lie for he and you for she.
That's a conscious, community-driven decision to evolve the grammar to reflect modern social values. You rarely see that happen so deliberately in natural languages.
It demonstrates the unique adaptability of a constructed language. Since the rules are established by consensus in the Academia de Esperanto, they can be deliberately refined for greater efficiency or inclusivity. It avoids the decades-long cultural lag natural languages often suffer from.
That adaptability is crucial to its survival. Now that we understand the structure, let's turn our focus to the people who speak it. We're moving into Section 3, the landscape of Esperantujo, the community, and its reach.
Right, Esperantujo, which literally means Esperanto land. It's the term the community uses for the collective sphere where the language is spoken, since there is no actual country that has officially adopted it.
It is, in essence, a nation without borders, dispersed across the globe.
A linguistic diaspora.
And while it's dispersed, there are definite centers of gravity for this linguistic nation.
Yes. The concentrations tend to be highest in Europe, particularly Germany and France, which is ironic given France's historical opposition, as well as East Asia, China, Korea, Japan, South America with a notably strong presence in Brazil, and parts of Africa, like Togo.
This brings up that intriguing statistical insight from Sven Nielsen, which contradicts the assumption that Esperanto would only flourish where the native languages were linguistically similar.
It's a vital finding. Nielsen determined there was no significant correlation between the number of Esperanto speakers and how similar their native language was to the Romanic vocabulary of Esperanto.
So what was the correlation?
It was socioeconomic. The language tends to be more popular in wealthier countries with high rates of internet access and high levels of participation in global science and culture. It suggests that the drive is about connectivity and access rather than linguistic comfort.
This inherent difficulty in measurement leads us directly to the great speaker debate, the challenge of getting accurate speaker numbers, which are famously hard to pin down.
The figures are wildly varied because, traditional census methods just fail to capture a non-territorial language. On the high end, we have the long-term estimate from Sidney S. Culbert.
Right.
He suggested that between 1 and 2 million people speak Esperanto at Foreign Service Level 3, which means they're professionally proficient.
And that 2 million figure is widely cited, especially in publications like Ethnologue. But it has faced considerable pushback, right?
Significant pushback. Critics like Zico van Dijk found that the total membership in all major global Esperanto organizations hovers around 20,000.
So it strains credibility to suggest there are 50 to 100 times more speakers than there are organized members.
It really does. His on-the-ground research suggested a much smaller, if very active, population.
And we have the lower 2017 estimate from Sven Nielsen, putting the number around 63,000 active speakers globally.
That figure is likely more realistic, though even that is debated by others. The point is that trying to quantify a diaspora community with traditional metrics is deeply flawed.
Which is why Juco Lindstedt's 1996 tiered system is so helpful. It allows us to visualize the community's depth rather than relying on a single, potentially misleading number.
It paints a much clearer picture of the community's structure.
Let's walk through Lindstedt's tiers.
Okay, at the very top, the first tier, we have the Dinascaloids, the native speakers. Lindstedt estimated about 1,000 to 2,000 people learned Esperanto from birth.
From birth.
The next tier down is the highly fluent, those who can use it like a second mother tongue, estimated at 10,000. Then you have the 100,000 active users, those who can communicate regularly.
And finally, the vast periphery of 1 million people who have a passive understanding. They can read it or follow a conversation.
That's the full picture.
I want to focus on that top tier. The native speakers, the Dinascaloi. It's extraordinary that a language intentionally designed to be non-ethnic has birthed native speakers.
It is utterly unique. These are children, often from international families, where the parents needed a common language that wasn't native to either of them. They are fluent in a language that has no native land, no traditional native folklore, and no singular ethnic identity associated with it.
That must create a unique identity challenge. I mean, what does it mean to be a native speaker of a constructed language?
It flips the script entirely. In natural languages, native intuition dictates grammar and usage. In Esperantujo, the rules are defined by the Fundamento de Esperanto and the Academia de Esperanto.
So the native speakers don't get the final say?
No. They might introduce minor colloquialisms or slightly different rhythms, but they do not hold an authoritative position on the language's structure. Their presence proves the language is functionally viable for full human development, but they must still abide by the original design principles.
The survival and expansion of this highly dispersed community today is overwhelmingly powered by the internet. Digital platforms have become the ultimate revival engine.
The internet solved the access and connection problems that plagued Zamenhof a century ago. The growth on Duolingo is massive. The English course alone attracted over 1.36 million registered learners by 2018.
That's a powerful pipeline of new speakers.
A huge one. And the utility is baked right into the digital infrastructure now. Google Translate added Esperanto in 2012, and Yandex Translate followed in 2016.
This is a level of digital legitimacy that makes the language feel immediately practical.
And its most significant digital real estate is the Esperanto Wikipedia, which, as of early 2025, contained about 379,000 articles. That makes it, by far, the largest Wikipedia in any constructed language. It's not just a vanity project, it's an active, heavily consulted resource. It demonstrates genuine utility for transferring knowledge.
Beyond content creation, the community has brilliant networking platforms like Amakumu and the decades-old travel network, Pasporta Servo.
Pasporta Servo takes the linguistic principle and makes it tactile. It's a directory of Esperantists in 92 countries who offer free lodging to fellow speakers.
So it immediately transforms the language from an abstract system into a concrete, practical benefit for travel and global community building.
It makes the abstract nation without borders feel real.
Let's shift our focus to the educational philosophy, particularly the propedeutic effect. This is perhaps the strongest academic argument for its continued use.
The term propedeutic just means introductory or preparatory. The concept is that teaching students Esperanto raises their general language awareness, their metalinguistic skills, so that they learn subsequent, more complex natural languages much faster.
The analogy provided in the sources is fantastic. They compared it to music instruction.
Yes, the study supervised by the University of Manchester used this analogy. Many schools used to teach children the recorder, not to produce a nation of recorder players, but as a preparation for learning other instruments.
So we teach Esperanto not to produce a nation of Esperanto speakers,
but as a preparation for learning other languages. It functions as a cognitive cheat code.
And the research results back this up, right?
Consistently. Studies in the US, Germany, New Zealand. They've all shown favorable outcomes. They indicate that a year of Esperanto followed by several years of, say, French or German results in greater overall proficiency in the natural language compared to students who spent the entire time on just the natural language.
It's simplified. Logical grammar acts like a linguistic template.
Exactly. It makes the patterns of other languages easier to recognize.
And this pedagogical utility ensures its place in formal education, even if it hasn't achieved universality. We see it in universities like Adam Mickiewicz University in Poland, which still offers diplomas in interlinguistics centered on Esperanto.
And we also see political efforts to normalize its educational status. There's a Brazilian Senate bill still under consideration as of 2015 that aims to make it an optional part of the public school curriculum. It shows that governments still see value in its unique structure.
That brings us to our final section, Section 4, Culture, Commerce, and Credo. Let's look at the cultural life of Esperanto, which is far richer than most people assume.
Despite its minority status, it supports a vibrant international culture. We're talking about a library of over 25,000 published books, which includes both original literature and translations.
And there are magazines and literary journals, too.
Several, distributed regularly. And the centerpiece of the physical community is a Universal Congreso de Esperanto, the World Congress.
This annual gathering, which has only been interrupted by the world wars and the 2020 pandemic, is critical.
It is. It consistently draws thousands of attendees, peaking at 6,000, and typically over 2,000 post-World War II, which is an incredible turnout for a constructed language. It was where the community validates its existence and the network comes alive face-to-face.
The movement also carries its history and its symbols. The traditional symbol is the green star flag, the Verde Stelo, approved way back in 1905.
Then there was the attempt to introduce a new symbol for the centennial in 1987, the Jubilee Symbolo. It featured two stylized, curved E's forming an oval shape.
But the community embraced a bit of humor with that one.
They did. It was quickly criticized by some and humorously dubbed the melano, or the melon. So while it officially exists, the traditional green star flag remains the dominant symbol of identification.
That sense of internal, sometimes humorous debate leads us perfectly into the ideological split that defines the community's long-term thinking. Finvenkismo versus Ramismo. This is essentially the movement's deep psychological debate.
This split governs the entire purpose of the language. The Finvenkistoi, or final victory adherents, are those who hold fast to Zamenhof's original high idealist goal.
They believe the primary mission is to keep lobbying and pushing until international bodies like the UN or EU officially adopt Esperanto as a universal second language.
Yes, and within the Finvenkistoid, we have two modes of achieving that victory. The Disabismo approach argues that victory must come from below, through a massive, popular grassroots movement that governments eventually can't ignore.
And the other way?
Disaprismo. That's the belief that the breakthrough must be imposed from above via political decree or governmental sanction. Zamenhof himself leaned toward the Disabismo path, recognizing that governments only sanction something once it's already overwhelmingly ready.
The other school, Rajamismo, took shape at the International Youth Congress in Rauma, Finland in 1980, and it offers a much more pragmatic view of the language's purpose.
The Rajamistoic are the realists. They look at the 20th century's political repression and recognize that final victory through official decree is highly improbable in the short term.
So they shift the focus entirely.
From political conquest to cultural enrichment, they focus on the intrinsic community and cultural value that Esperanto already provides. The global network, the literature, the ability to connect without bias.
But they didn't abandon the idea of spreading the language, did they?
Oh no. The Manifesto of Rama stated their intention to spread the language, to put into effect its positive values more and more, step by step. It's a shift from waiting for a diplomatic breakthrough to celebrating and utilizing the vibrant, existing culture that has already been created.
They view Esperanto as a solution that is currently functioning, not one that's waiting to be approved.
Precisely.
These philosophical debates translate into concrete political and economic proposals. We can look at the political party, Europe Democracy Esperanto, which runs candidates specifically to aim for official EU language status.
And their efforts are strongly supported by economic data, notably the 2005 Francois Grin report. The report analyzed the cost of maintaining English as the European Union's working lingua franca.
And found it costs billions.
Billions of euros annually. And not just in translation costs, but in the institutional and training biases that favor native English speakers.
So the economic argument for Esperanto isn't just about saving money on translators, it's about leveling the linguistic playing field.
It's fundamentally about ideological fairness and economic efficiency. The Grin report argued that adopting a neutral language like Esperanto would eradicate those institutional biases, creating significant economic and ideological advantages by giving every member state an equal starting point linguistically.
And while no sovereign country has signed on, Esperanto has received critical quasi-official recognition from major international institutions.
The most important of these came in 1954, the UNESCO Montevideo Resolution, which granted official support to Esperanto as an international auxiliary language.
Right.
Furthermore, the Universal Esperanto Association holds consultative relationships with both the UN and UNESCO, keeping the language visible on the international stage. The World Health Organization even created an Esperanto version of its COVID-19 safety course, demonstrating its utility in a global health crisis.
And then we get these tiny, surprising official footprints, like the World Service Authority, which prints all its personal documents, including the World Passport, in Esperanto alongside the UN official languages.
And we can't forget the microstates. The Republic of Rhode Island, a short-lived platform off the Italian coast in 1968, adopted Esperanto as its official language.
And today, the Republic of Molossia, a micronation in Nevada, uses it as an official language alongside English.
These examples, however small, demonstrate its symbolic power as a language of non-national identity.
What's perhaps most fascinating here is the sheer breadth of its global footprint across media, science, and even faith. In the realm of science, it achieved early recognition when the French Academy of Sciences recommended its use for international communication way back in 1921.
And that recommendation wasn't just theoretical. The Nobel laureate Reinhard Selten was an Esperantist, and the International Academy of Sciences San Marino takes it a step further. Esperanto is the primary language of teaching and administration there. This shows the language functioning as a serious vehicle for advanced cross-cultural academic work.
On the media front, the cinematic connections are surprising. Who knew Charlie Chaplin utilized it in The Great Dictator in 1940, where he used it on the shop signs in the Jewish ghetto?
And then you have the two full-length feature films produced entirely in Esperanto dialogue. Angroy in 1964, a French crime thriller, is virtually unknown.
But the 1965 B-movie horror film Incubus is infamous.
Infamous because it starred William Shatner, who struggled immensely with the pronunciation and was shot entirely in Esperanto. It's often cited as one of the worst pronounced Esperanto films ever made, which just adds to the legend.
And bringing it back to modern high-profile cinema, the director Alfonso Cuarón, known for Gravity and Children of Men, named his production company Esperanto Filmage.
Esperanto Films, a quiet nod to its international ideal.
Finally, let's look at its incredible diverse connection to faith. The Baha'i faith encourages its use as a tool for global unity, and Lydia Zamenhof, the inventor's daughter, became a dedicated Baha'i.
But the truly surprising endorsements come from opposite sides of the political and religious spectrum. Ayatollah Khomeini of Iran, for instance, championed Esperanto.
Really?
Yes, he called on Muslims to learn it as a neutral language for better religious understanding. And that led to concrete action. The state published a translation of the Quran into Esperanto. Khomeini saw it as a tool to bridge communication gaps without importing Western linguistic dominance.
And you can flip the switch entirely. On the Christian side, two recent Roman Catholic popes, John Paul II and Benedict VI, have regularly used Esperanto in their multilingual Urbi et Orbi blessings at Easter and Christmas.
They've done it every year since 1994.
That span from revolutionary Islam in Iran to the seat of the Catholic Church perfectly illustrates the language's core appeal.
It does. Because it is neutral, it can be embraced across vast, otherwise irreconcilable ideological divides. It serves as a functional tool for international communication without demanding cultural or national allegiance.
So what does this all mean? We started with the dream of Zamenhof, who engineered this beautiful, logical language intended to defeat the misery caused by linguistic separation and prejudice.
And it has survived the most intense imaginable political pressure. We've seen that Esperanto is this unique blend of high idealism, the goal of world peace and understanding, and a hyper-efficient, pragmatically designed grammar.
It survived repression from Stalin, Hitler, and the French linguistic establishment precisely because its structural neutrality appeals to a passionate, resilient, and international community that prioritizes connection over conformity.
It never achieved its founder's goal of universal acceptance by government decree, but it is unequivocally an active, living language.
Yeah.
It has a distinct culture and a network that spans continents and political systems.
It's thriving digitally today, where it failed diplomatically a century ago. It has successfully transitioned from a revolutionary project into a vibrant global niche, celebrated by the Remistoi.
Which leads us to our final thought for you to consider. If a constructed language that faced organized repression from the 20th century's most brutal dictatorships can not only survive but thrive digitally, grow a population of native speakers, sustain a culture, and connect travelers across 92 countries through a shared neutral identity, What does that suggest about the true, resilient power of human connection over national boundaries and the long-term potential of design over evolution when it comes to the future of communication?